Welcome to the Voices of Manufacturing, where business leaders across the industry share their unique challenges and insights. Brought to you by Dozuki.
All right, welcome to the Voices of Manufacturing podcast. I'm your host, Brian Salee, and joining me today is Corey Brown. Corey is the producer of our podcast, but also leads our industry research here at Dozuki. Welcome to the podcast, Corey.
Hey, Brian, excited to be here.
Yeah, it's about time we got you on. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of folks have read. Corey produces a lot of content for our blog and has a lot of deep industry experience. So I'm excited to have Corey on the show today. Today we're going to talk about some, I think, really interesting statistics that Corey has stumbled upon during his research for a new digital course. Corey, tell us about this new course that we've launched.
Yeah, Brian, I'm so excited to be talking about this with you. We've been really hard at work researching and speaking with customers and gleaning insights from our internal team here. You know, we've spent over a decade working with hundreds of manufacturers, and this is the first time we've really gathered all this insight and information and packaged it in a way that's going to be helpful to, I think, a lot of folks. You know, specifically, we're talking about putting digital tools on the front line, you know, empowering the operational workforce. And, you know, we have a lot of experience doing that with our product at Dozuki, but we also have just a lot of experience working with people in the industry, helping them identify the right challenges and how these solutions can actually have a sustaining positive change. So it's called our Frontline Digital Transformation, or FDX for short, Masterclass. And I'll get into a few details about that later. But, you know, throughout all this research, I've uncovered a lot of interesting industry insights and stats. And I just want to talk about them with you today. You know, I know you have tons of experience working with our customers, and I kind of wanted to hear your take on these stats and provide some color to how these statistics impact digital transformation on the front line. So let's just get started if that sounds good with you.
Yeah, let's dig in. I'm excited to talk about these stats. I always enjoy a good statistic, but there's always a story behind it. So hopefully we can kind of shed some light on the story behind these stats.
It may surprise some folks. I think maybe more folks outside of the industry or those who aren't necessarily on the front line, but it is 72% of factory work is still performed by people. And I say it might surprise folks outside of the industry because I think there's a lot of perception we have out here of, you know, robotics and automated machinery kind of transforming the space and taking those jobs away from people. But in reality, you know, there's a lot of uh, opportunity for people to still improve factory, to add value to factories, and it's shown here. I mean, this even surprises me that 72% of factory work is still performed by people.
Yeah, I think you probably, what we all see in the news, right, as the companies that get all the media attention, like a Tesla, and you hear about,
Right.
Elon's plan to have lights out manufacturing. That didn't go quite as planned, but it's still highly automated. And those companies get all the attention. But, when you really look at manufacturing, there's this long tail of companies out there that, they're just getting maybe their first robot into the factory. And so the stat's a little bit surprising, probably, like you said, for folks outside the industry, but I think that's probably really accurate. I've been in a lot of factories, and many of them have zero automation, maybe some packaging automation, and but definitely not too far on that automation journey yet.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, like you said, some of the Teslas of the world may be some outliers, but even other companies that have some robotics and machinery in their operations, that still requires maintenance, that still requires technicians and operators to run those effectively and make sure they don't break down or have maintenance issues. So, despite the advances in technology, humans aren't going away from the factory floor. I don't really see that happening in the future. It seems like from your experience, you don't really either.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a really great point too, right? Even the companies that do bring in automation, well, someone's got to program the automation, someone's got to maintain it. There's lots of additional jobs that are created through that automation, and a lot of the automation that's being brought into factories right now is, you hear from a lot of companies that can't fill open roles. Well, they're trying to automate, really low skill tasks that are repetitive that most people don't want to do anyways.
Right. Yeah, that brings to mind, I think our first podcast episode with Jim Vanosky from Forbes. I remember him talking about the fact that, listen, technology isn't here to replace jobs, it's here to help them, to improve them.
Yeah.
We're taking away the dangerous jobs, the repetitive tasks that can cause strain and injury over long periods of time. And, technology needs to be seen as a tool, not as a replacement.
Yeah, yeah. As you say that, I think augment is the term I hear a lot of folks. We want to augment, help out, our operators, give them additional capabilities.
So this is about the concept of brain drain. This is kind of a jargony term, but essentially it means the loss of institutional or tribal knowledge. And a lot of companies are seeing this in particular because of the retiring baby boomer workforce. And a lot of companies are worried about filling those gaps. They've had people working in the industry for decades, and all this valuable insight and knowledge that they've gleaned over the years, it needs to be captured. So 97% of companies are worried about the financial impact of quote unquote brain drain.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by this. I'm actually more surprised. What's the 3% that aren't worried about it? What are they doing? Because they must have a pretty good plan, or maybe they have a really young workforce. But even if you have a young workforce, I think we've seen with the shifting workforce, people change jobs so frequently nowadays. There's still this huge impact where you get some up to speed, they hit a certain level of competency, and they're moving on to a new role, and now you got to start over from scratch in a lot of cases if you haven't done a good job capturing some of that knowledge and then using it to train those new employees.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, brain drain or tribal knowledge, I think, impacts a lot of areas of companies in the space, not just operations as
Yeah.
well. It's it's taken a different approach to how we value knowledge in the workforce, and recognizing that there are different ways with new technology to capture and provide more access to that company wide. I think one quote I've heard once is knowledge isn't a individual asset, it's a group asset, it's a company asset. And as this baby boomer or this generational shift is happening, um, I think it's highlighting the fact that maybe people haven't done a good job of providing, or really leveraging the knowledge that their operational workforce has. There's a ton of very smart operators, people that have been in the space for a long time, and their knowledge needs to be shared so it can improve the next generation.
Yeah, and that's interesting, Corey. So I'm wondering, as you're mentioning this, the I think it's like 55% of I'm sorry, no, 27% of the workforce in manufacturing is going to retire over the next 10 to 15 years. And those numbers might be just a
Right.
little bit off, but it's somewhere around there. And because there's such a mass number of retirements that are happening and so much knowledge is leaving the workforce, do you feel like it's really fundamentally changing the way companies operate to where in the past, when someone left the company, it wasn't a big deal because you had someone else behind them that knew what to do, and they didn't really have that discipline of documenting processes and capturing that knowledge. But now it's going to be transformational for a lot of these companies because they have to do it. They don't have a choice. And that might be a new discipline that they carry forward, even after those
Right.
retirements.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. I mean, it's something they just didn't have to think about,
Yeah.
right? There was always somebody to fill the shoes, or they had been mentoring somebody that's able to take their place. But you know, it says companies are worried about this, but frankly, I think you and I and a lot of innovative companies see this as a real opportunity because, like we said, we have all this untapped insight across the operational workforce. Let's take advantage of it. Let's not just let it go by the wayside any longer.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially, here in the United States, I think that's one of the biggest concerns, that we should have as a country. We've outsourced so much of our manufacturing, so much of our know-how. Uh, you know, Other countries are now, gaining that expertise and building up years and years of experience. And, we need to maintain that. That's really important knowledge for us to have when it comes to, how do we build these type of things? How do we design a product for manufacturing? Um, and that's something where bringing back some of the manufacturing in the United States is really helpful to make sure we maintain that knowledge.
All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit here, Brian. This next statistic is a little bit more about um, digital technology and smart factories. So it says early smart factory adopters reap twice as many benefits, reporting a 20% increase in labor productivity. So that's crazy. I mean, if you can imagine if your workforce could be 20% more productive, I think any company would jump at that opportunity. Here we have early smart factory adopters, kind of just defined as people leading the digital innovation within the space. They're the ones who are seeking out new solutions rather than waiting for a problem to happen. They're seeking to improve continuously, and it shows in the results. So when they apply these new digital tools to the factory floor, you're going to see a boost in performance big time.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know if you have any further details on this, but what's considered a smart factory? Is it something as basic as now you've got digital time cards, or is it more machine connectivity and you're monitoring your machines? What dictates a smart factory?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think part of it can be connected machinery. Certainly, we've seen a history of manufacturing adopting connected machinery and analytic solutions. But I think it's also about um, making your workforce smarter
Yeah.
by giving them more resources and access to better tooling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned the machine connectivity. I think that is the part a lot of manufacturers had early success with because it was fairly easy for some of these machines. You could buy bolt-on adapters to be able to track when the machine's running, when it's not running, when there's maintenance issues. Just having that data now and being able to act upon it. That's probably I could see easily where you would have 20% increase in labor productivity there.
But moving on here, it's easier said than done, of course, with these things, especially when you're dealing with a shifting workforce or maybe an older workforce that could be resistant to change. So this next stat, highlights the fact that we understand there's value in digital transformation, but that doesn't mean it's as simple as just buying a new software or buying a new tablet. It says that 95% of industry leaders agree that digital transformation is essential to future success, but less than 30% reach their stated goals.
Yeah, that's
And you've helped a lot of companies with that, Brian, with starting their, dipping their toes in digital transformation. Do you think this statistic is accurate in your opinion, and maybe why you think that's the case?
Yeah, I think I'm not surprised to hear 30% didn't reach their stated goals. I think, one of the things that's often overlooked in manufacturing is just how complex a manufacturing organization is. There are so many things
Yeah.
going on within that organization, and there's, you know, a lot of key stakeholders from various departments that need to get involved in these initiatives. And I think for a lot of companies, they just don't have that they just don't have that muscle memory yet. They haven't done this before. And so there's, as they're embarking on these digital transformation projects, they don't know who's going to lead the project or who should own it. And what are the other key stakeholders that should be involved? What should their involvement be? So I think a lot of it comes down to, we talked about this previously with Michael Molenberg from 3M, but just a lot of manufacturers have an outdated org structure. Um, You
Right.
might embark on a digital transformation project. Who's leading it? Oftentimes it's being led by a group of employees who, they already have dedicated roles. It might be IT or HR, and they're taking on this project in addition to their day-to-day work. And I think that's where the challenge is. You really need someone whose sole focus is on making sure that these digital transformation projects are going to be successful, and they really need 100% attention on it. Whether that's a chief digital officer, or, in 3M's case, I think they have a operational technology group, but some dedicated group with dedicated people working on these projects, I think, is key.
As we know, it's again, it's easier said than done, but it's a new process for a lot of companies to understand, and maybe some companies just don't fully appreciate that these digital tools are a new type of technology that require different strategy, different planning, different implementation techniques. It's a little bit different than upgrading your machinery, let's say.
Yeah.
So this one says, of the companies that aren't able to realize or reach their stated goals of digital transformation projects, 80% of the lost value, so 80% of where this failure occurs, happens during the initial implementation or far before. So I think, and that kind of speaks to what you're talking about, Brian. You need a intentional strategy, and you need dedicated resources to make sure that these projects get off the ground right, because the hardest part is in the first stages, really making sure that you're building the right foundation, identifying the right solutions. um, and that's, I think, a lot of what we specialize in here at Dozuki. We have a digital tool, but that's only part of it. It takes a lot of work and collaboration with these companies and stakeholders to make sure that we are approaching this new strategy in the right way.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I mean, I think the thing here is it goes back to, it's all about the people. No matter how exciting this project is, or, if you try to build out the business case and you've got a really strong ROI, and it's, we're going to make a lot more money or save a lot more money if we do this thing, it always comes back to the people who are involved in the project. And I think, what we're seeing here with this stat, 80% of the lost value occurs before or during the initial implementation, is there's a lot of bureaucracy in a lot of these companies, because, as we were mentioning earlier, you've got that outdated org structure. It's not really clear who's running, the project sometimes, or who has the ability to slow things down, speed things up, because you don't oftentimes have a dedicated team responsible for the project. You might have multiple teams that include HR, IT, manufacturing operations, quality, and that just really slows things down to the point where you probably had some really motivated employees at the beginning, but as things slow down and you're not making progress as quickly, it's easy for those employees to lose motivation and be, deterred by the slow progress. So again, I think that goes back to,
Absolutely.
making sure you've got someone who's dedicated. Their sole focus is, pushing that project forward, and they've got the authority and, the means to make it happen.
Yeah, and it's a big, like you said, a big component of this is the people behind the project. And so that's one side of it. But the other side of it is the people that this project is affecting. How
Yeah.
is your workforce going to be impacted by this digital tool? A lot of times when maybe we buy a new machine or something else, like something that's more of a hardware based solution, you don't have to consider cultural resistance or change management strategies, because humans aren't as integral to making that change successful. But here, with digital tools, it's all about the people who are using that technology. A tool is only as useful as the user of that tool, right? So our final stat here is 97% of digital transformation projects fail when companies don't include operators and line managers early on in the process. So, I mean, operators and line managers, that's essentially your frontline workforce, right? Those are the people that are doing the daily tasks that keep your operations running smoothly.
That's that's shocking. I'm blown away by that stat. That's pretty compelling reason to get those folks involved. I'm curious though, at what part in the process do you get them involved? Where where do you seek their feedback or opinions and yeah, how do you really get those folks involved and when?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I don't think there's a simple answer to that. I can kind of speak to some of the things I've learned when creating this masterclass. Part of it, I think a big part of it, is involving them before you've even identified the solution, right? Before you're even considering implementing a new tool, you need to make sure that you accurately understand the challenges that the frontline workforce is facing and what's important to them, because they're going to have a much better grasp of the daily challenges facing the workforce and what they see as obstacles to improving performance.
Yeah. So that's the you got to get out there on the floor and you got to see what it's like for them in their day-to-day life and whatever tool you're implementing, or whatever technology it is, how's it going to impact them as you're saying? How will it benefit them? Maybe how will it change their work for better or worse? And having a real appreciation of that. I think the days of hey, the VP is going to make a decision and then the project's going to get green lit and then it's just going to get pushed down. Those days are long gone. And I'm not sure how well those types of initiatives worked in the past, but yeah, I could definitely see how
Right.
frontline operator engagement, line managers, so important because they're ultimately the ones, as we see with this stat, that are going to really dictate or determine if the project is successful or not.
Yeah, and then once if you've actually identified the right challenges to solve for, it's going to make that implementing that tool so much easier because you're actually solving a real need on the front line.
Yeah,
You're not just doing what you think is best, you're doing what your workforce thinks is best. And I keep thinking of this quote that we had from Taylor Harlan on the podcast where he says, people don't resist change, they resist being changed. So involving them from the get-go is a monumental difference. It can be very simple. It doesn't have to require a lot of time, but knowing that their voices are important to these new solutions goes a long way for making a sustainable or lasting, successful digital transformation project.
absolutely. Well, Corey, this is great. I think we covered some really interesting stats here and hit on some topics that have come up over the first 9 episodes of the podcast. Where can people go to learn more about the Frontline Digital Transformation Masterclass that you guys have launched?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I mean, so apologies, it is a little bit of a mouthful. So we're calling it our FDX Masterclass.
FDX, I like that.
Digital transformation is already kind of an acronym, so we just added frontline onto that. And it's a 3-part series, so it's full of insight. It's a video series that's featuring some of the experts on our podcasts and other customers and partners we've worked with. I'll be the host, but I'm not the expert. I don't have the experience that these folks have. So we're really leveraging a whole pool of insightful and intelligent people in the manufacturing sector to kind of share those insights as well as help you take action on those learnings. So in addition to like a video series that we have throughout this masterclass, we are going to be providing worksheets. A great example that relates to this last stat is we have the Frontline Gemba Walk Challenge, which is a worksheet that guides people through a Gemba Walk, specifically geared towards evaluating the needs of the frontline and how digital tools could potentially solve for some of those challenges. But it's packed with a bunch more content downloads. I encourage everyone to check those resources out. You can register for this exclusive class for free on our website. So I'll provide links and information in the show notes, but you can visit www.dozuki.com/FDX. So that'll take you to the registration page. And from there, you can sign up and get started right away.
And Corey, who do you recommend? I mean, who's this course for? Is anybody in manufacturing? What's the type of people you guys designed this for?
I think it's for anybody that is in manufacturing is considering digital tools, especially people early on in the process. You may not know where to start, um, and it can kind of be overwhelming to see all the new technology out there for the space. But this is really kind of a ground zero. How do we make a strategy for digital transformation, and how do we iterate off of that? It's not, you know, these projects aren't huge quick wins. They take time, but over time you'll see a lot of improvements to your performance, and you'll see that these digital tools do have a real impact. It's just about approaching it the right way. So anybody that's interested in digital tools, specifically for tools that can empower in the frontline or operational workforce. That's what we specialize in. It's our bread and butter. We're really effective at it with all the customers that we've worked with. And again, this class is kind of a culmination of all those learnings that we've had as a company.
Great. I love it. It's less about the technologies that you could implement, and it's really about if you are going to implement new technologies, how do you go about doing it? What's the process that you use?
Yeah, that's right. Well said.
Excellent. Okay. Well, excited about this course, Corey. Thanks for joining me on the podcast for the first time, and look forward to having you on again as the producer of the show.
Thanks, Brian. Been honored to be a guest on the Voices of Manufacturing, and hope to chat with you soon.
All righty. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you for listening to the Voices of Manufacturing, brought to you by Dozuki. To stay up to date, subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit dozuki.com/podcast to learn more.